The oldest and strongest human emotion is fear, and the oldest and strongest type of fear is trepidation of the unknown. When we were children, our parents told us that monsters didn't exist, but we were sure that something was lurking under the bed or in the closet. Fear sees, even if our eyes are closed. Welcome to the realm of the arcane. My name is Lon Strickler. Join me as I examine unexplained creatures, strange manifestations, and remarkable realities. Imagine this next hour as a voyage of discovery to strange lands, seeking not for new territory, but for new knowledge of the supernatural. Come on board as we begin this adventure together. Hey folks, good evening and welcome to another episode of Arcane Radio, where we explore the unexplained live on Beyond Explanation. I'm your host, Lon Strickler, coming to you from the spectral shadows of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Before I introduce my guest, I'm going to go ahead and read an account actually that I posted today. This particular account's been out there for a while, I think. I saw it for the first time today, but I just got this feeling it's been out there. But so if it sounds familiar, just excuse me for that. This was an account by a First Nations member. Had this strange encounter at his grandparents' home on a reservation. He's Cree, so it was a Cree reservation. I do believe it was probably in Alberta, and it was 1994, I think. So anyway, he states, I'm a First Nations person from a reservation in Canada. I grew up in different reserves with different family members. Now, this happened when I was 7 years old. My sister and I were visiting our grandparents' house. The adults decided to go to bingo, and they got the eldest cousin to babysit everybody. His name was Corey, and he was 16. My grandparents' home had a few trees around their home where they had planted, and it was mostly all field, which they farmed. So we were outside all day long. So my cousin Corey was sitting on the patio as we were all jumping on a trampoline, and he was keeping an eye on us. I went inside, and I came on back out, jumped off the edge of the patio onto the trampoline. I was telling everybody on the trampoline to move as I was about to jump, but they were completely fixated on the field. So I looked towards the field as well, and what we saw were two things coming towards us in the field. The field is about a mile long, but you could see two huge black things hopping in our direction. They'd come up, then down like a snake taking a peek in perfect unison together. I called Corey and pointed towards the field. He told us all to get inside the house and lock up because he didn't know what it was they were looking at. And so we did as you said. My sister was beside me crying, and my cousin was holding my other little cousin. I got up to the front door, and Corey was running back in at that time. And he said that these things are circling around the house. He was trying to run across the road to the neighbors because our phone had completely shut down. So I went back to the couch to sit with my sister so we could comfort each other. And when I got to her, she told me to look at the window. So I did. Those things were looking in. And they had their hands against the window as they peeked in. They looked like crocodiles, but shaped like humans. Their face wasn't as long as a crocodile. They had 5 fingers, but they weren't human fingers. They had long nails with crocodile-like skin and walked standing upright. They wore long black cloaks or something like that on themselves. They stood at the window for only a few seconds, then they took off. So not long later, my grandparents got home with my uncle. We all went running to them, crying, telling them what had happened. My grandparents were very traditional and told us we had to leave and needed to go to my aunt's. She had lived on another reserve. My aunt came to get us. Not long later, my uncle was upset. He drove along the field looking for whatever they were, but when we all jumped in my aunt's van to go to their house, those things were behind our grandparents' house. We could see them as we took off. Then they ran south. I always thought that this was a dream, but then at one family gathering, I mentioned it to everyone who I recall was there at the time, and they all remembered it. So basically, that's the whole story. Now like I said, I think this occurred in Alberta, in the Plains area, Alberta, which I think is probably eastern Alberta, next to Saskatchewan. But I don't know what this was. Was it a reptilian or something to that degree? I have no idea. But I thought that was pretty interesting. So tonight, I want to welcome biologist and paranormal researcher Wild Trees to Arcane Radio. Now, he has a degree in biology, has published research in a peer-reviewed journal, co-written a college science lab manual, has an extensive field research experience, and has had extensive field research experiences in Texas, Colorado, Alaska, Montana, Wyoming, and Arkansas. Now, he specializes in animal behavior, experimental design, and microbiology. Now, Wild Trees can be found on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram as Deep Wild Tech. And he is on a weekly live YouTube broadcast at Black Lotus Production. So, Wild Trees, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Lon. A big fan.
Well, I appreciate that. So then you probably know you can expect about anything.
That's what I wouldn't want anything less.
Yeah, well, that's cool. So, how about giving me an overview of your, what you do as far as science and scientific method, real field research, and anything that goes along with that?
Yeah, sure. So, I specialize in biology, and that's a branch of science it studies life. So basically, every aspect of life. And so, perhaps the smallest unit of life is just one individual cell. And so you and I are made of billions, trillions of little living cells. And then the largest unit of biology is really our planet. Our planet is full of life. So that's basically the scale of biology today. It's basically from a tiny cell all the way to the planet. I suspect we're going to find life in other planets, so then the scale of biology will expand even larger. So it's a pretty big field.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I do is I work in a laboratory, and my goal is I kind of brainstorm research projects from the ground up. I have to write a proposal, and then I have to have it approved, usually by somebody. I don't have to, but if I'm applying for money or something, it's usually good to have it approved by maybe other scientists to say, before you start, this is a good plan of action. Right. Then I conduct the work. I'm a field biologist, so I like to go out and the mountains, the forest, and I gather all my data. That's usually the funnest part. It's really fun. But then I have to go to the laboratory, and that's not as much. It's not as much fun, but I'm skilled with a microscope, and you have to get all the numbers together, and then you have to write a formal paper. So then, a formal paper in science has an introduction. It's got a methods, it's got a results, and a discussion section. Those are the main sections. So once you finish that project, the paper, you submit it to a journal, a peer-reviewed academic journal. So when you submit it to that journal, other biologists or scientists will look at it, and then they will give you feedback. They'll either say, rarely, but sometimes they'll say, this is perfect. Nothing's wrong with it. Let's publish it. And then once it's published, then the goal is that this publication is accessible to the entire world. And whatever you discovered, it becomes humanity's knowledge. Other people can use it to come up with some advancement in technology, or they could expand on it. But this is basically how humanity expands their knowledge base. This is how we learn about our place in the universe, is through this process that I described. It's possible to do research and not do this. For instance,
Mhm.
if you're the government, or if you're a private company, you could do what I just said, but you're not going to publish it. You're going to keep it to yourself because there's no incentive. You probably paid all this money, and so this method that I described, this academic method, this is how the world expands their knowledge base, basically.
So, do you work for an independent group, or you work for a university?
Right now, I work for an independent group. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. It's something I never thought about doing, or even. I'm quite sure it's pretty involved, and if you're relying on somebody else's money, I think you probably end up having to have a little bit of pressure and have to come up with some pretty good thesis and results by doing that.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, and then that's why I try, without giving too much detail about my personal work. I try to self fund my work,
Mm.
self fund it, because then you do have freedom. But this is why what you just touched on. This is why mainstream science has not accepted the paranormal. It's basically because of this funding thing. Okay, so as I just laid out, if the world is going to learn about the paranormal and the world is going to accept the paranormal, it has to be through this academic avenue. So I believe paranormal research has been done with private companies and with the government. But as you remember, as I said, those results are not published. Those are private results. So the government can do whatever amazing research they want. A private company like SpaceX or Microsoft can do whatever amazing research they want. But you and I are never going to find out about it. I mean, unless we
Mhm.
work for the company. Okay, so why isn't the academic world doing paranormal research? Well, it basically is because of funding. So these projects, they don't have to, but they can take millions of dollars and hundreds of hours of work to do. Okay. And where does that money come from? Well, in the United States, it comes from research grants. For example, we have the National Science Foundation, which is a tax. It's funded by our taxes, but they give out lots and lots of research money. But the people that give out this research money, they're the ones that specify what the money is used for. So they're the ones that say, this is for cancer research. This is for
Mhm.
studying fruits. This is for studying fish, whatever. So as long as none of them say this is for paranormal research, there is no incentive for an academic scientist to do paranormal research because the money's not there. They're not going to waste their time. So this is kind of a vicious cycle, and this is why we're at the place where we're at today.
Well, then that's understandable. I mean, I know there are many instances for individuals who are scientists that they do not really want themselves to be known as far as delving into the paranormal.
Yes, absolutely.
So, in your case, how did that happen?
Yeah, it's well, I first got interested in the paranormal as a little boy, and perhaps Lon, if you grew up in North America, perhaps your experience. So when I was a little kid, every library I went to, at the public library or at the school library, they had a tiny little section of paranormal books, but they always
Mhm.
had one. It was maybe 10 books: Bermuda Triangle, cryptids, UFOs. That was really the first inkling or indication that there was something more going on in the world. That's really how I got into it. And then what really kind of jump started my work in the paranormal is that I was in graduate school getting a master's degree in biology, and I got sick for like 2 weeks. So I started just watching Netflix, and I saw Stephen Greer's documentaries on Netflix,
Mhm.
his UFO documentaries. And then it'd been a while since I looked into the paranormal stuff, but at this time I already had all this scientific training. I knew how to evaluate. I knew how to evaluate claims, think critically. I had already conducted studies myself. So then I started digging into it, and I was like, oh my God, there is a lot of evidence here. There is something definitely going on, and that's what started my interest in the paranormal. And honestly, as a scientist, like, this is amazing. Like, this is like there is so much possibility for like new discoveries, uh, just publications, just opportunities to change the world within the paranormal. Because when you're a scientist, it's very competitive. You're trying to you know get the newest discovery, but a lot of these fields are oversaturated. There's already a lot of there's a lot of geneticists already, entomologists, ichthyologists, virologists, all these mainstream subjects. There's a lot of sciences there, so it's a little bit harder to come up with something new. But there's this whole domain of paranormal research that just no scientists have touched. So if it's done delicately and it's done smartly, then it's a huge opportunity for scientific understanding to be done. But it does have to be done delicately, and it has to be done correctly for it to work.
So, for you to get involved in something like this by being a scientist, I'm quite sure you've had some experiences that probably kind of linked together and got you thinking about, what's the connection between science and the supernatural.
Yes, I have. I have had experiences. I guess I'll just quickly name some of the broad things that happened to me.
Sure.
When I was like 10 years old, I felt like an invisible hand try to stop me from closing a door. It was like on my wrist, and I looked down, and I was like, this feels just like a human hand. This does not want me to close this door. And I was 10 years old. I was just like, okay. And I kind of pushed against it. I closed the door anyway, and it smashed my mother's fingers in the door, and she had to go to the emergency room. And so I was like, okay, so an invisible hand was trying to prevent me from hurting my mother on accident. So that's odd. I mean, it was a positive experience in that it was trying to help, but that's a very odd experience that I can't explain with conventional science. I also, when I was 19, I guess 9 years after that, I was sleeping on my couch during the daytime. I woke up and I saw my two younger sisters, which were kids, standing next to me. And I thought it was odd, like they were just staring at me while I was napping. But then, like, I focused my eyes, and it turns out they were like three little gray aliens, classic gray aliens. I think they had little spacesuits on. They were very childlike. As soon as they noticed that I was awake, they freaked out like children, and they ran down the hallway. And I went back to sleep. Now that experience, hey, it could have been a dream, could have been real. The jury's still out in my mind. But the odd things about that experience is that at the time, I'll tell you right now, man, I had a girlfriend at the time, and I was 19. I had just started college. I was playing video games. I was not thinking about UFOs at all, So it wasn't like it was in my mind, and it didn't feel like sleep paralysis either, because I wasn't like I didn't feel paralyzed. I felt very calm. I felt relaxed. I was just an odd experience, and I will say, thank God, these aliens that I saw looked very non-threatening. Thank goodness, because I've heard of some terrifying looking ones. They look like children. So then, another thing that happened was, I guess 4 years ago, I saw an orb of light. I was with a research assistant. I was in graduate school again. And just above the trees, we saw like a round, super white ball of light that just streaked across the sky. And it had like a tail, like a trailing tail of light. We both saw it. And I guess that could be classified as an orb. It's definitely a UFO. It was unidentified. I haven't been able to find what it could possibly be. It was nighttime. It didn't make any noise. There wasn't anybody around there. I looked in the field over which it was at, and I didn't see like fireworks or a meteorite. I didn't see any evidence. And then I guess the last major one is I was at a research station. Once again, this was exactly 3 years ago. Okay, exactly 3 years ago, I went to a biological research station, and I stayed there for the entire month of December and some of January. And so the Park Service had a house I could stay in, this big 2-story house. So I stayed there the whole time by myself, and it was very lonely. It was very cold. It was beautiful. It was like a one-horse town. When you're at the front porch, you could just see every star in the night sky. Every day I would wake up, eat breakfast. I would go out in the woods and take pictures. I just had a really fun time. But at night, it became very lonely. It was a big house, very lonely. My only friend and the only other living thing in that cabin was a roach that lived in the bathroom, which I befriended, and I was so happy to see it. I would give it mangoes, and no, it was just me and this roach. But anyway, one night I received a phone call. It lasted probably like 5 minutes. I believe that whatever called me were two non-humans. One thing started talking to me, and the sound of the voice, it did not sound like a human. It did not sound feminine. It did not sound masculine. It just sounded bizarre. Started talking to me, and I probably sounded like an idiot. I was probably like what? Excuse me? Pardon me? What's going on? And then another one came on the phone, like it's a buddy. So it was like a three-way call. Then they started talking to each other, and they started laughing at me, and I was paranoid. I was like, man, I was like, these are aliens, and they want to abduct me tonight. And so I was very freaked out. Now, I wish I would, if I could go back, I wish I could have been friendlier and more open to the experience. I wish I could have laughed with them and gone with the flow. But unfortunately, I was very paranoid. Around that time, I realized that they were talking with English words. So every word was English, but they were using the words incorrectly.
Mhm.
I've since learned that this is a common thing. Like UFO occupants, sometimes people will talk to them and they look human, a little bit off, but they describe the same language. So it's a weird usage of English. Anyway, so then I was like, man, what am I gonna do? And I got defensive, I guess. I did not want to get abducted. So what I did is I've been in similar situations in these woods. Okay, I will say these woods are probably it's called the Big Thicket National Preserve. This is one of the most biodiverse areas in the entire world, and I will say there's a strong connection between biodiversity and paranormal activity. Obviously, you're going to probably see a lot of cryptids in an area that has a lot of biodiversity. So this area is known for landed crafts, landed UFOs. There's a road there. It's called Ghost Road, and it's just known for spheres of light. Just everybody knows about it. It's got a big marker. There's Bigfoot sightings in this area. So there's just a lot of paranormal. It's a paranormal hotspot. So I had my own paranormal experience. I've almost died at least twice in this area. One time I got lost in the woods. I could have easily drowned or been bitten by a snake. One time I got stuck in some quicksand, which I didn't even know was a real thing. I was collecting these water beetles on the side of this big river. The river had like really long sandy banks. I was there with my research assistant, who was a really petite girl, very small girl. This is important. We're walking down, and I guess I stepped in an area that had the right concentration of water and sand. So I immediately sunk down to my thighs, basically, in sand. And I was just like immovable. And then I looked at my research assistant, and she's bouncing up and down the quicksand like nothing's wrong. And as I was panicking, I realized that she did not weigh enough to break the surface tension of the sand. So she was fine, but not me. And then I was like, I'm not going to tell her because she's having a great time, and I don't want to sour the situation. So let me try to get out of this myself. So I eventually. The other thing that was helpful is I had on waders. I always wear waders in the woods, so these went up to my chest, so I wasn't directly in it. I had like a little shell, and eventually I had to just inch my way out. I mean, like I had to calm down first. I could see how easily if you were to panic, you would just make it worse, and you would. And if it was alone, if I would have been alone, and if I would have panicked, it was game over, man. But I inched my way out of it, and I did find a new beetle on the side of there. I found a new locality record, so I did make a small discovery. Anyway, that's to say that I have been in danger in this area. So I got in that mindset with these aliens. So I what I did is I remembered the last thing they said to me, which I believe my memory is hazy, but I believe that the closest thing I could remember is in this weird alien voice. They kept asking me. They were asking me, "Where's the bucket, Leroy? Where's the bucket, Leroy?" Very odd. So I memorized that phrase and I asked it to them. So I started asking them. I was like asking them, "Hey, where's the bucket?" And I started calling them Leroy. And then I got more heated. I opened the door and I went outside. I was just shouting into the darkness. It was cold. I had the phone. I was just like, "Where's the bucket, Leroy?" But eventually, like they freaked out and they hung up on me. So they thought I was the weird one, which is very interesting. And as far as I know, I did not get abducted that day. But yeah, those are some of the major paranormal stuff that has happened to me.
So, so you being a scientist and you've had experiences, do you believe that you were either at the right place at the right time, or are you someone who's predisposed to paranormal activity?
It's a really good question, Lon. Really good question. Because I've heard both arguments. You know, I think some of these were, yeah, I don't know. Okay, like say the one with my mom in the door. I don't think I was at the right place at the right time. I think something was watching
Hmm.
me. The one with the research station, that might have been the right place at the right time because that was a paranormal hotspot. And I didn't mention this, but in that same area around the same time, someone shot a video of a UFO. It's still up on YouTube. So it was like the same period I was there. So it seems like I was just in a paranormal hotspot, and they just whatever they keyed into me, decided to have a conversation with me. So I guess to answer your question, I think it's a little bit of both. But because I have had multiple paranormal experiences, I think, yeah, maybe there is a trajectory there. There's a pattern that it seems to target me. Another thing, though, it could be that paranormal stuff happens to everybody all the time, but only certain people notice it.
And
Some
they
people
don't
are,
recognize it,
they
right?
don't recognize it. Yeah, that could be what's happening as well.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot to that. You know, I have been lucky enough to have a few things happen to me over the years, and
Right.
because of that, I think I'm somewhat predisposed. And as far as getting into the paranormal eventually, and then writing and doing more research, I think been much more lucky enough to be able to get certain cases, certain events that kind of seem to drop in my lap.
Yeah, definitely.
And for why that happens, I really don't know. But it is interesting. You know, I've had people ask me a lot about that. You know, this stuff seems to be attracted to you. Well, that may very well be, but you know, I mean that just I really don't have an answer to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as far as doing paranormal research and being a scientist, what's the goal? I mean, are you trying to find a connection between the two, trying to understand more about one or the other, and how to use it? I mean, basically.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, look, to me, I don't see a distinction between the paranormal and science. I don't
Hmm.
see it. There's not a distinction between them. Okay. So let me explain. So first of all, I think every paranormal thing that I've heard of, it can be described and understood through the process of science. If you're a scientist and you say that's not possible, you are lazy. You are a bad scientist. I'm
Hmm.
sorry. So if look, I'm going to tell you something about science, and for you and anybody watching it, if you only learn one thing, please remember what I'm about to say. Okay, so I'm just going to describe what science is and what it's not. And once again, I'll just say it right now, I don't care if you like science. That's not, my goal is not to convince you that science is great. If you hate science, you should hate science. But my goal is to educate you to what science is, so that if you hate it, you could at least know what it is. You could make better arguments. Okay, so I'm not trying to evangelize science here. I just want people to understand what it is. Okay.
Hmm.
First thing I'll say about science is that science can be thought of as a tool. Okay. Science is benign. It does not have a negative or positive intention or goal. Science is like a car. You know, it's a tool that gets you somewhere. It's like a hammer. It's like a spoon. You know, a spoon can help you eat delicious ice cream, or you could, do bad things. Use your imagination. But that's what science is. It's a tool. The way this tool works, the way science works, is basically you could ask a question to science, and it will give you an answer. You could ask it anything. You could ask it, how can I get out of jail sooner? You could ask it, how can I make $1 million? How can I make this boat more fuel efficient? How can I get to the moon? I mean, whatever question you want, you can ask it to science. That's the purpose of science, and you will get an answer. Now, the important thing is you have to be unbiased. Unbiased means that when you're asking the question, when you're forming your question, you really cannot have a preconceived notion. You cannot believe the answer before it happens, because science will give you an answer and you may not like it, and you have to accept it. If you're not unbiased, then the whole science process falls apart. Okay, so just to summarize real fast, science is simply a tool that can be used to answer any question you have. In order for this to work correctly, you have to be unbiased. When you go in, you cannot have any preconceived notions. Okay, so the last thing about science is there's two components to science. This is the part that I want people to memorize. There's two things to science that have to be there. So remember, science, two things. The first thing is, in order for science to work, you have to have repeatability. Repeatability means that something, you say something, you come up with discovery, someone else has to be able to do it consistently. You have to have the repeatability. Now, I hear people say that the paranormal, it lacks repeatability. You know what I say? Yeah, sometimes it does, but you're being lazy if you think that you cannot get repeatability out of the paranormal. You can. Just be more creative. Be a scientist. So, okay. So the first thing, you have to have repeatability in science, okay? Remember that. Repeatability. The second thing is you have to have falsifiability. Falsifiability. Falsifiability means you have to have the ability to prove something false, to say something is not true. Okay, so a lot of people make this mistake. They think that science is about proving something right. Like science is used to prove that this is right. That's incorrect. Science is used to prove, it has to be used to prove something wrong. Falsifiability. Okay, so science has to have repeatability, and it has to be able to prove something wrong. It has to have falsifiability. So let me give you, this falsifiability concept is a little confusing, but let me explain it, okay? So here's an example that I learned in college, okay? Here's a claim, okay? Here's a claim. You go to your buddy's house and he says, there's an invisible dragon living in my garage, okay? So there's a claim, okay? So you're like, let me use science to discover if there's really an invisible dragon in my buddy's garage. Science is perfect for this. Okay. So then, like I said, science, you ask a question. So the question would be, is there a invisible dragon in my friend's garage? Okay. So now this is where falsifiability comes in. So you're actually not trying to find out if there is a dragon. You're trying to say, can I prove that there isn't a dragon? So this is how you do it, for instance. So let's say you tell your friend, okay, what if we pour some paint on the dragon? I know it's invisible. Let's pour some paint on it, right? And then we should be able to see its outline, okay? And your friend says, no, that won't work because the dragon's got a force field and the paint will just slide off. You're like, okay, fine. That's cool, man. That's cool. So, okay, I can't prove it. I can't prove you wrong because you're saying that the paint will go away. So then you say, okay, how about this? Let's put some flour on the ground, and when the dragon moves around, he'll leave his footprints. Okay, then your friend says, nope, you can't do that because it hovers above the ground. Okay, once again, you can't prove him wrong. You're lacking falsifiability. So you say, okay, that's fine, dude, that's fine. Okay, what if we use like a heat sensor camera? And then your friend says, no, that's not going to work because it can modulate its temperature. Okay, so I think you get the point, okay? That claim lacks falsifiability. You cannot use science with that claim because your friend is saying it's impossible to prove it does not happen. Okay, so another thing that your friend is doing is he's using what's called in science, he's using multiple outs. Multiple outs is a way that it's a method to get out of science, okay? Multiple outs is like you always just have an excuse for everything. Here's an example of multiple outs. One time I was in college, I asked a girl out on a date. She said, no, I can't go, I'm busy that day. And I say, okay, well, about the next week? She says, no, I'm doing something else. And I say, okay, well, how about we go a different day? She's like, no, I can't leave the house because I'm taking care of my grandpa. Anyway, I kept asking her questions and she just kept denying me. She was using multiple outs, okay? So anyway, let me summarize it all. Science is a tool. It's not good or bad. It is used to answer questions, any question you have. But in order for it to work, you have to be unbiased. You have to not have an answer in your mind. You have to accept what the answer is, and you have to have repeatability. So whatever you discover has to happen over and over again. And number two, it has to have falsifiability. Whatever you're trying to discover, you have to be able to prove it false, not prove it right, but prove it false. That being said, I think almost any claim in the paranormal can be studied with science. Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts. I mean, on and on. All of those claims can be studied using science. Okay,
Hmm.
so that is my goal, is to start making progress with some of these questions. Okay, and my goal specifically is to publish a research paper that is involves some aspect of the paranormal. Now, in order to do this, you have to be a little sneaky. Not really. Like, I can't just publish a paper with the name Bigfoot in the title, Sasquatch, Poltergeist, Ghost. I think I have to be a little sneakier with the title and what I'm trying to say. Some scientists have talked about this already, like John Alexander. I'm sure you're familiar with John Alexander.
Hmm.
He's worked with the government. He's worked at Skinwalker Ranch. He talked about how they used to publish paranormal papers, and I believe scientists are publishing paranormal papers right now, but they're using titles that kind of belly or obscure their true paranormal content. It's
Hmm.
kind of like ATIP. ATIP was a government program, and it was studying UFOs. But if you look at the name ATIP, it doesn't say UFO. It says, like, anomalous aerial phenomenon. So that's basically one of the things that has to be done when you publish paranormal research right now, is you have to, the title it can't be so explicit. The content could be about paranormal, but the title cannot be so explicit, just so you could get past the reviewers, basically. Yeah.
Well, see, now this has been the argument within the paranormal ever since I've been involved. I've been around since the 70s doing this.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, and as time has gone on, I believe that the scientific world needs to be a little bit more open-minded about the phenomena.
Mhm.
Now, that being said, it's kind of hard to prove the phenomena under the guidelines you just gave.
It is hard. It is very
Yeah,
hard. It would have been done already if it was easy.
sure, sure. I mean, you talk to people about Bigfoot. Well, the only way you're going to find a Bigfoot or prove a Bigfoot is if you do find the body or to find the actual DNA to where it can be sequenced and be understood. I mean, it just can't be put out there that it's an unknown being, and that's it. I mean, there's got to be something tangible there.
You're right. You're
Uh,
absolutely right.
and you
100%.
being a biologist, you would want there to be some type of carbon-based, if it is carbon-based, some type of carbon-based proof that this is a living thing.
Mhm.
Now,
Yes.
if it's something other than that, let's say that Bigfoot turns out to be an ammonia-based alien or something like that, then
Very
you got a
possible.
problem. But I mean,
Yeah.
but it's going to be harder to prove it, and worst of all, it's going to be hard to convince some people that it's actually some type of being.
No, you're right. I mean, those are 100% true claims. Okay. So my response to you is this: the study of paranormal phenomenon using the scientific method, I would say it's in its infancy.
Hmm.
As far as I know, perhaps it's fully developed in the secret world, but as far as
Right.
publicly, it is in its infancy. Okay, so unfortunately, we got to crawl before we could walk. Okay,
Hmm.
so you have to be, from my perspective, you have to be a little selective of what project you attempt to start first. For instance, proving Bigfoot, that's probably that's a really big project. That's a little bit too ambitious, unfortunately. Definitely for me. I have my ideas of how I would do it,
Hmm.
but it's a little bit ambitious. So I have a list of 4 categories that I could go over that I think would be good starter projects for my specific skills that I have. But
Okay.
let me tell you about the Bigfoot thing, because this is another opportunity for. I used to teach college, so I love teaching. So a little opportunity for me to teach about cryptids and about Bigfoot. Okay, because what you said was correct, but let me expand on it. Okay, so the world and scientists, they know that there is a giraffe. They know that there's a zebra. Even though they've never seen a zebra, everybody accepts that there's a zebra. So how do we get to this point with Bigfoot or with a lake monster? How do we get there? So this is how it works in science. If this is cryptids, if you have a new organism, what happens is, a scientist goes out and they find the organism. Now, usually, like you said, they need a body. Okay, so that body is found. Let's say somebody just finds a Bigfoot body. Probably not going to happen, but you find a corpse of a Bigfoot,
Mm.
which would be the ideal scenario, because I suspect that Bigfoot is probably more intelligent than humans. So there's a lot of ethical and moral questions involved in just killing with them. But ideal situation, a scientist finds a dead Bigfoot body. What would happen then is that body would be preserved. You probably preserve the skin and the bones. Now, those skin and bones they would be called a type specimen. That's what is known
Hmm.
scientifically. A type specimen. Every known animal we know of has a type specimen. That specimen is deposited in a museum, and anybody can go check it out at any time. That's why there is no debate. Nobody's going to argue about a giraffe, because somebody will just say, look, there is a type specimen in Germany. If you don't believe me, go to the museum and look at it for yourself. That's how new animals are discovered. The other thing that happens is somebody publishes a paper. The paper talks about, why the animal is new. It talks about what it looks like. It talks about where it was found, the circumstances it was found in. It's given a new name. It's a really long formal paper. I've done this before because I've discovered a new species of beetle. So that's where we have to get to in order to make some of these cryptids. But like I said, cryptids are very tricky. I suspect that many cryptids are highly intelligent, and I suspect that they have radical adaptations that make it very difficult for them to be caught. Like, for instance, Bigfoot. I suspect that Bigfoot is more intelligent than humans. Okay, I think there's multiple explanations for Bigfoot, but I believe one group of Bigfoot is a flesh and blood animal. I think they're more intelligent than humans. I
Hmm.
think perhaps they have the ability to communicate telepathically. I think
Hmm.
perhaps they have a radical adaptation that allows them to form portals or to go through portals. I suspect they probably have invisibility functions. I think they're just animals, but they have all these amazing intelligence and adaptations, which make it very difficult for us to catch one. It's not like a sea cucumber.
Well, let's put it this way. Now, I have seen a Bigfoot.
Yeah, I
I
remember.
have
I've seen
seen
your.
some.
I've seen your cup. Yeah.
I have seen something that I believe was a Bigfoot. I have seen something I believe was a winged humanoid.
Okay.
I But let's just talk about the Bigfoot. I saw
Okay.
this thing. I recognized it. It was a physical being. You
Sure.
know, I heard it
Yes.
making noise. I heard it doing things. I saw the whole 9 yards. Uh, I am still not convinced that it's a flesh and blood being. Why?
Okay.
Because after I saw the Bigfoot, I started getting interested into why this thing was around.
Okay.
I have heard so many explanations. I have heard the interdimensional. I have
Right.
heard the flesh and blood. I heard every argument. Is this thing alien? Is this able to move between different realities? Is it able to some types either match its vibration to move in and out of inanimate objects or the whole
Yeah.
9 yards.
Of course. Of
So,
course.
so when somebody tells you they saw a Bigfoot, the only thing they can tell you is, unless they absolutely saw this thing disappear, and I have had people tell me that, but that's all they can tell you. They saw it. I do believe there are actual Bigfoot. I do believe there are flesh and blood Bigfoot that live in certain parts of the world or the country in particular.
I agree.
And but I think the majority are something other than what normal carbon-based beings on this planet are. I think they have an ability to do things that we may have had the ability to do at some point and just don't know how to do it anymore. And that's why we're confused with it.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. Definitely. That's why. That's why I'm saying that this. You have to categorize these phenomenon, and unfortunately, Bigfoot is. It's like the Moby Dick
Yeah.
of paranormal phenomena as far as proving it scientifically. I do think it's possible. I
Mm-hmm.
will say that I'm steering away from that kind of stuff because there's a lot of ethical questions, like I asked you. There's a lot of
Yeah.
danger involved. But I will just say briefly that I believe in order to catch a Bigfoot or animals similar to Bigfoot, okay, you basically have to become a trickster. We always talk about the paranormal being a trickster. They're always like one step ahead of you. You have to mimic them. Your methods as a biologist, you
Mm-hmm.
have to you have to trick them. You have to get really sneaky, more sneaky than them. At that point, it becomes less like a field biologist. You become more like a high level spy. You know how spies hunt other spies? That's what you have to become. And a lot of biologists do not have those skills. I mean, spies have those skills. But once again, I'm not getting into that realm because of the ethical problems and the danger
Yeah.
problems. Call me a coward, but I want to be a long-lived coward at the very least.
Well, paranormal research is basically just being counter. It's just counterintelligence.
You're right.
I mean, that's all it is. I mean, and I get reports all the time, and I got to figure out which ones that I believe in. I give most people the benefit of the doubt, but of course you're going to get a few oddball things that you just think, that's just not going to happen, or I'll put it out there and I'm just going to get ridiculed for it anyway. But I am pretty open-minded about this stuff. And the reason I am open-minded is because I've had some pretty strange experiences over time. I've had, I'm intuitive. I have seen a lot of things. I have experienced a lot of things. So I know there is a different degree of, I don't want to say life, but there's a different degree of reality out there.
Yes.
That we just don't understand.
Yes.
We call it a lot of different things, but like you say, science-wise, it's just going to be difficult to prove it.
Difficult, but not impossible. I think that's,
I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's going to be difficult.
It is difficult. Once again, it would have been done by now if it would have been easy.
Sure.
But if you want to, I could get into these categories, and
sure.
I would love to get your feedback. Okay. So if I was to start a paranormal project, these are the categories I've come up with. Okay. Number one, I think it'd be very interesting to studying this idea of living UFOs that are perhaps amoeba-like or jellyfish-like. That this was described. One of the people described it was Ivan T. Sanderson, who is a paranormal investigator who's also a biologist.
He was he's the father of cryptozoology. Basically, he's the one who, besides him and Charles Fort, are kind of the ones that put it out there.
Yeah, and he came up with it
as well. Yeah,
he came up with the term ultra-terrestrial as well.
Right.
So I will say I first found out about Ivan T. Sanderson through Zelia Edgar. Zelia Edgar has a channel called Just Another Tinfoil Hat. So she turned me on. So anyway, I think the book was Uninvited Visitors, A Biologist Looks at UFOs, which was published in 1967. So he describes and he gives the hypothesis that perhaps in our upper atmosphere, some of these UFOs are actually living animals that are like amoeba-like or jellyfish-like. Now, the reason why this appeals to me is because I'm making a little supposition, but perhaps these things aren't too intelligent, okay? Perhaps they're not super intelligent and they're not going to haunt me for several years. Now, they could be. But when I hear the words amoeba-like and jellyfish-like, I'm thinking, okay, these are maybe a little more benign in nature. This is more like what I'm used to studying.
Well, let me throw this out at you as you're talking about this.
Okay.
I have investigated a phenomena that people call or describe as being a flying manta ray.
Okay.
A kind of a bioform.
Yes.
It looks like a manta ray. It undulates like a manta ray. It comes in different sizes. Sometimes they're translucent. I have heard of these things all over the country, mostly in the eastern part of the United States, but there have been some other parts.
Okay.
There's no real rhyme or reason for it. It looks like a UFO, but it's most likely not. It could be a UFO. It's something that's unidentified and flying, but it may actually be biological.
Yes.
There have been other cases I have investigated of higher flying craft that seem to change in shape, have different physical properties to them, as opposed to the standard nuts and bolts type of craft.
Right.
So yeah, I do what you're coming from here. I do believe it, and I have had cases as to something similar to that. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I
Oh,
just
no,
want
no.
to mention that.
I want you. I mean, honestly, the whole purpose I came on here, I want to get your expertise. You have decades of expertise. To me, it's invaluable. So by all means, please tell me your feedback. Okay, so the way this project would work, like I'm used to doing surveys of animals. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the projects I do is somebody hires me or gives me money to go in the woods and just find every animal that's there. And some of these are very hidden. So I would probably, form a plan. I would pick an area in the atmosphere geographically where I want to survey, and I could probably send up some balloons or something, and I would have to, tweak the methods. But basically, I would just try to do a survey to see if I could find any of these things, any evidence of them, and then I would progress from there. What I like about this project is that it's, I believe that there's a lot of, well, I know for a fact there are thousands of undiscovered species on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
They most likely live in the ocean, underwater, underground, in mountains, and in our upper atmospheres. These are areas that humans do not travel. It's like free real estate. Of course, there's going to be, and I believe some of these animals are large, and I believe some of them are intelligent as well. So,
Mm-hmm.
so that's one idea. Okay, now another idea is okay, the CE5 methodology, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. Now,
Okay.
what I like about Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind is it has got that one thing I mentioned, repeatability. Apparently, you're able to meditate or follow some methods, and you could bring these anomalous lights to you. I mean, this whole idea is built on repeatability. So that is
Okay.
something where I could see that I make methods, I do trials over and over again, and it's very straightforward. I'm going to try to summon these lights, and then once the lights come, I could check with apps to make sure it's not a helicopter, make sure it's not a craft or a star or some kind of natural phenomenon. And Jacques Vallée, he's talked about this. If you photograph a UFO using old-fashioned film, that those photos are data rich. There's a lot of information you could get out of them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the potential dangers of CE5 is that if they are intelligent beings that you're attracting, they could have nefarious intentions. So it could be dangerous. But I don't know. You got to start somewhere. So CE5 to me seems like it's got the repeatability, and it's something that could provide a lot of data. So that's something I've been considering as well. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Another one is, okay, here's one that I think is probably the most likely to occur. And this is the one that I think you give me a lot of feedback. So I feel like an avenue of paranormal research is to start off by helping people who are suffering from paranormal problems. Okay. Because I don't want to create paranormal problems by sticking my nose and conjuring whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But if somebody is already suffering from a poltergeist, abductions, Bigfoot, whatever, if they're already suffering and they don't have any help, if I could try to help them with my knowledge, and if a byproduct of that help is that I learn something about the paranormal, I
Mm-hmm.
think that's another way of doing paranormal research. But yeah, I'd
Well,
love
I
to
mean,
get
it's
you.
similar to Spirit Rescue. I mean, it's something I've been involved with for years now, and I've done remote viewing as well,
Mhm.
and you can get into that. I mean, and you will discover certain aspects of the paranormal that you probably haven't even really thought about before.
Very cool.
And that does happen. I mean, look, I've been doing that a while, and I've experienced some things I never thought I would ever experience.
Wow.
And I can't say it's actually explainable,
Yeah.
but I know it did happen. Now,
Yeah.
why it happened, there's a lot of reasons why these things happen. No, I'm not saying we have a uh, real idea of what it is, what the reason is, but there is a reason.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that sounds like it sounds worthwhile, and
Mm-hmm.
you have an amazing resource with your decades of experience. People know to go to you with these cases. So you're like a source of this information, which is really great. But of course, you work very hard to get that information or to get to the place you are, which is very respectable. Um, okay, I guess I have two more things. One thing is developing highly detailed thought experiments. Okay, now this is where we could get into the risky Bigfoot high level paranormal research. So what I mean by a thought experiment is, for instance, I have come up with a method of trapping a poltergeist. I believe that certain, not all, but a minority of poltergeists are probably physical animals. They probably have the ability to travel through time, and they probably have the ability to teleport and some other things. So I'm working on a story that's a very detailed story on how to trap one. Once again, let me say, when I say trap, I don't mean a physical trap. I do not
Mm-hmm.
believe a poltergeist can be trapped with a physical trap. No, no, no. It has to be a mental trap. You're basically trapping it with its using its desires and your intention. Let me give you an example. You know, one way to trap a dangerous animal like a tiger is you put a cage out with bait, and it goes in there and it gets caught, and it immediately knows it's caught, and it freaks out. It gets stressed out, and it's not a good situation. Let's think of an alternative method of catch this tiger. Let's say you want to catch a tiger, and you say, you know what, I want to catch him, but you know, the cage that I want to contain him in, because I want to observe him, I want to photograph him. Let's say the cage is 1 acre of woods. Let's say I want to keep him in 1 acre of woods. So what you do is you fill that 1 acre of woods with what it likes: fresh meat, fresh water, pheromones of what it likes. And so basically, this tiger could end up spending a lot of time only in this 1 acre of woods.
Mm-hmm.
It effectively is trapped because of its desires. But it at no time does it ever realize it's trapped. It has no inkling that it's trapped, and
Mm-hmm.
it's actually beneficial to the animal. He likes it, and so that's basically how I think I would trap a poltergeist, with its desires. And
Well,
another thing. Go ahead. Go ahead. Please.
let me mention this. Now, a poltergeist is not a spiritual being. A
Okay.
poltergeist is a thought form
Right.
that's actually manifested by a living being. In other words, if you get into a situation where there's a lot of stuff going on with a family, dysfunction, illness, and such, uh, certain people are able to create a thought form,
Yes.
and that will turn into a poltergeist.
Yes.
They rarely realize what they're doing. As far as catching one of these, I think that is possible, but it would have to be on the same level that this poltergeist is. In other words, it would have to have the same type of energy level that the poltergeist is, and as well, you would have to have some influence on the host.
Yes, of course. And this is why I believe this thought experiment that I came up is very detailed. I may send it to a select amount of people, but
Mm-hmm.
the reason why this will only be a thought experiment is kind of the reasons you said. I think it's very dangerous. It's incredibly dangerous and
Oh, it can
perhaps
be
unethical
dangerous.
and unethical. So I think we can make some progress by just making it a thought experiment, detailing, like I would detail the methods of trapping it, and I would walk through what would happen through every step. And perhaps that could give us some more insight without actually having to do it. So that is another avenue, is making these very detailed thought experiments to
Mm-hmm.
generate ideas. Yeah. But yeah, your feedback is invaluable for something like that. And I guess I'll say the last thing that I've thought about is it seems like UFO occupants, aliens. There's a lot of cases where they either have like a little wand or a little stick they point at you, and they just immobilize you. You're just
Mm-hmm.
stuck. You can't move. To me, that sucks. I don't. I think that's a evolutionary disadvantage. I would like to level the playing field. I would like to develop a method to prevent this paralysis from happening.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another avenue, basically, is try to just level the playing field, because these things obviously have advantages over us, and it's not good evolutionarily. It's not good. It's like, it's like a tiger versus a zebra. But let's say the zebra never developed its stripes. The zebra's stripes help it blend in, and it levels the playing field. But imagine if that zebra never leveled the playing field. It was just out there without any stripes, and the tiger could just have its way with them. I feel like that's what's happening with a lot of these paranormal entities. It's not a level playing field. They have a huge advantage of us, and I'd like to level the playing field in some
Well, let
ways.
me throw this caveat at you.
Okay.
I believe, and I know there are other people that believe this, but I believe that those beings, particularly what people describe as the grays, and they come in all kinds of sizes, shapes, and such.
Yeah.
I think they are actually evolved humans. And in
Okay. Yeah.
fact, I believe they are from our future, and that they had developed a way to come back into our reality or our
Yeah.
timeline.
Yeah.
And that those abilities that they do have are either some type of hybrid, hybrid ability that was bred into them, or it was something that was biologically evolutionized. I mean, they actually evolved into something, a higher being or a higher type of thought, a higher type of intelligence.
Yeah.
I mean,
Absolutely.
that's my theory, and I think it can go both ways. I mean, it can go back as well. I believe that previous to what we are, there could be beings that have the ability then to move into our reality, which is what may actually be some cryptid activity.
Yeah, of course, of course. Now, let
So,
me ask you.
I just wanted to say but
Yeah,
that's
what is your main evidence, or what has convinced you that they are future travelers, the Greys?
just that they're what they look like, what people see, that even people that had no idea what they were looking at, but their description is very similar. It why they would look so much the same, why they seem to be the overwhelming species, and it seems to me that there is a good, I don't know, this is my personal feeling. I think they probably have tried to come back to try to either right or wrong or something
Yeah,
that caused them to turn into what they turned into.
yeah,
Maybe there was a mass nuclear or biological disaster that either screwed them up so bad that they had to leave this planet or go someplace else, and they evolved into what they are in our future, and that they are trying to come back to either be hybrid, with us, to try to find some type of human DNA to possibly fix certain mutations that have happened.
yes.
I think it's a very possible. I think that's very possible.
It all checks out. Yeah,
Yeah, and as far as time travel goes and going into folding time and space, well, if you just look at string theory and quantum computing, there is a good theory that it is a reality, and it can be a much more reality as time goes by. And I think that's what we're looking at. And I think a lot of what we experience of these humanoids, these gray humanoids, and there's others as well, other types of humanoids, may actually be something that has evolved from the human species.
yeah. Okay, yeah. Thank you for explaining that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've heard it before. Like the aerial school encounter in Zimbabwe.
Mhm.
The messages they had were about avoiding technology. They were predicting a disastrous future for us. That's not the only time. Usually, when they talk to us telepathically, that is the message they have. It's like, you're going down a bad path. You're using technology incorrectly. So that would make sense. And I wonder if that could kind of explain the family connection. How certain families are visited over and over again. They could be
There you go again. I
they
mean,
could be our descendants. That could
is
be our
there some
bloodline.
right? Is there something in the bloodline, something biologically that's connected to
Right.
these future humans that connects them to these beings? And that I see it all the time with people who have gone through the abduction experience or believe they have been going through the abduction experience or have had an encounter, that it's a continuous thing, and it happens generation by generation by generation.
Yeah.
And you can kind of guess what has been going on, but that may be a very tangible possibility.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, in that instance, I mean, some of the implications are that these guys are probably trying to help us. They have good intentions, but
I don't believe that.
so you think that they don't have good intentions,
Oh,
even though they're
let's put it this way: I wouldn't trust one.
okay.
I've seen I think there are some degrees of trust, but I think for the most part, and I've been involved with this thing with David Eckhart and his
Oh yeah,
whole thing
David
for
Eckhart. I've
years.
heard. Yeah, I've been hearing about your stuff with him.
And I think there is an agenda down the line. I mean, what that is, he's not the only person I've worked with this. I have worked with people who have just suddenly disappeared after talking to them and never showed back up again. I mean,
oh my goodness.
and there's no proof that they were really taken, but they just, there's no evidence that they are around anymore.
Sure.
So I do believe there is an agenda. From what David's told me, I do believe that they have no issues with taking biological material from humans and disposing of what else is left.
Okay.
I think that is, I mean, when people say, "Well, I wish I'd be abducted," I say, "Oh, no, you don't. I don't think you want to be," because there's a lot of, you hear a lot of things. I've heard a lot of things, and it's nothing that I'd want to be. I have been what I believe abducted. I have had lost time. I have been shown some things.
Okay.
But I don't particularly want to do it again.
Sure.
Though nothing major happened to me, and actually the experience was very interesting.
Okay.
And I was told a lot of things that, I never even thought of before, but I don't want it to happen again.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, going back to this question, this possible project is basically to prevent these things from happening. So developing some kind of method or technology to prevent these abductions and paralyzations that these things are doing to level the playing field. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to implement that and then see if there is some type of further evidence that it may actually be causing, some, helping or causing some type of change.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, I tell you, the hour flew by and we're going over an hour. But I mean, if there's anything that you want to come up with and contact me about it, I'd be more than willing to talk to you about it and help you with it. I mean, I'm interested in this.
Great. And if you have any cases that you need, you would like to have my insights. If there's anything that's around my area, I'm around, south, the Gulf Coast of Texas.
Okay.
All years.
Okay. Well, I thank you for coming on the show. It's very interesting.
I had a blast. It was great meeting you, Lon.
I had to get you back on again.
Oh, I love it. I would love it.
Maybe you'll progress to the point where I can put your name out there too.
Yeah, we can hope. We can hope.
Okay. Well, you take care, and thanks again.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Okay. Now, if you have an unexplained encounter or sighting, feel free to contact me through the Phantoms of Monsters blog site. If you're interested in supporting Phantoms of Monsters on Arcane Radio, you can use the PayPal donation buttons on the blog and newsletter. And our YouTube channel, Beyond Explanation, has a lot of new content coming on. We've got a lot of new shows starting. Check it out and definitely subscribe. Even join. I mean, we have a program there where you can join up and get first run videos, and it's in its infancy, but this is kind of rolling down the road. So check it out. You may enjoy it. I want to again thank Wild Trees for joining me this evening, and I want to thank you for coming and listening to the show. Stay healthy. Have a safe, enjoyable weekend.